Okay, just to be respectful of your time, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining us for our second In the Middle with You session today, everybody. We have some awesome guests with us from around the state, and they're all going to be sharing with you how the start of the year has been going in regards to handling what I'd like to think was the back end of the pandemic, but based on what our guests were telling us this morning, things are already kind of returning back to making some of those tough decisions and calls and dealing with quarantining and masking and that sort of stuff. So that's really what we wanted to do this morning, was to share out where's everybody at with that, how is it changing already, and people will have a chance to kind of collaborate, ask questions, and hopefully learn from one another this morning. And of course, as always, we have Bob Kefkin, our Associate Director of Government Relations, with us this morning, and he's going to get us kicked off with a legislative update. I do have our kind of collaborative learning document that I'm going to drop in the chat. So we're going to have that we can connect with one another, check in terms of attendance. We can connect with one another, post contact information, that sort of thing. We have the chat going right now. If you have something you want to share, you can ask questions. So we want this to really be collaborative in nature. So we're going to start with Bob, and then we're going to hand it over to all of our guest panelists today. So Bob, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I know you have some slides you want to pull up, and you can go ahead and get started, sir.
Yeah, so I figure I'll just start by, naming the elephant in the room. I love this. I got this morning from somebody. Thought this sort of summed up everything about the start of the school year so far. Thank you, Kent County, for suffering on behalf of all of us so that I could start my presentation on this note this morning. So I'm going to jump right into a legislative update. The slides that I'm going to share with you today are in, hold on, which screen am I sharing? That one. Are in the folder for today. Ryan, does everybody have access to the folder?
They will by the end. I will make sure they get a copy of the slide. We'll send an email follow-up with all the stuff getting shared today.
Great. So with that, let's rock and roll the legislative update here. I'm going to be pretty quick. I'm going to rock through some stuff. This is just a high level. Here's the latest, greatest, hottest stuff. ESSER equalization is probably the biggest thing money-wise going on right now. You'll remember back when we did the budget, the legislature dropped in a whole bunch of federal money, the ARP dollars, to equalize or nominally equalize the amount that districts were getting, because the money is distributed on a Title I formula. The federal dollars, most of them are distributed on the Title I formula. So if you're a low title population district, you weren't getting very much from the feds. What the state did was to take its discretionary 10% of federal funding and appropriate it, for the most part, on a formula that said everybody's going to get at least $1,093 a kid. But the legality of that is now in question. We got a letter from the feds that basically says, hey, we see what you did there. And what we said in ARP was you need to target this money on underserved populations. You're giving these dollars to districts with the lowest populations of Title I eligible students. Not sure how that meets our intent in the ARP Act. So you better come back with a good explanation, state of Michigan, and explain to us exactly how this is going to work. So this is not the final word. This is not a final decision. USED has yet to make a final decision. But this is going on right now, and this is under sort of a subtext to all of these money conversations around how we're going to spend ARP dollars. If USED says no, the thing to remember is that even with the higher than projected state revenue estimates that came through in May, state revenues are exceeding even the higher than expected estimates. In other words, we have even more money than we thought we were going to. More than enough to backfill the $390 or $362 million of federal dollars that the state spent on equalization. In other words, the state could pay for equalization out of school aid dollars. Ideally, though, we wouldn't have to do that, because then school aid dollars could be spent on other things like foundation or whatever else. But it's a possibility. It's out there. but know that that's going on. The legislature would have to act to backfill the equalization dollars, though given the popularity of equalization, I think they would probably do that. Moving on to masking, the things we know now are that all we have really is guidance, and everything is being shifted in terms of decision-making to local districts and the local health departments. You see there the stats that I got as of yesterday from the governor's office. They're tracking mask mandates statewide. So about 220 districts with mask mandates. You can see that broken down in terms of number of kids and percentage of students in LEAs with a school mask mandate. The situation varies greatly by local health department. We don't know where this is moving going forward. We certainly know the trends with infection rates and everything else seem to indicate that things are not going to be as good as they are now, and that's not all that great. So remember, DHHS is encouraging layering defenses. That is multiple things, not just masks, but masks plus vaccination plus screening and testing, which is why I'm sure your inbox is blowing up with all of the urgings from MDHHS to do things like contact tracing and testing. I do want to differentiate between quarantine and isolation, two different things here. Quarantine is when the person may be ill, but hasn't been tested, isn't COVID positive, isn't showing symptoms. Isolation is what happens when a person is actually COVID positive. And the reason that differentiation matters is because when you're dealing with local health department regulations, some of them are differentiating between the two. Most recently, the state issued some updated guidance on September 8th around how to handle quarantine and isolation. Again, it emphasizes that layered protection, but it clearly focuses on returning students to the classroom and gives pathways to get kids there with incentives for masking and a reliance on testing for a quicker return. The local health department is still in charge when it comes to determining what are quarantine and isolation mandates. But this is the guidance that MDHHS has put out. I got this graphic yesterday morning. It is an updated version of what went out last week. I still haven't been able to find it on MDHH's website. I got texted it. So once I'm able to confirm that this is the thing, I'll get it pushed out to everybody and dropped in several tweets and do what we usually do with it. But this hopefully gives you roughly the same information as you got last week, just maybe a little bit more detailed or nuanced as to how the MDHHS is recommending local health departments handle situations of quarantine and isolation when there's an exposure. I'm going to remind you all that under 380.11a, schools have broad authority to take actions like masking. Everything from banning peanut butter sandwiches to banning guns in schools are covered under 380.11a. So you certainly have the authority, though I say that recognizing full well what the reality is on the ground and what you guys are dealing with in your buildings right now. And that just knowing that you have the authority under state law is not the same as actually having the support of your community, of your local law enforcement, of your local health department to enforce these sorts of things. So we see where you're coming from right now. And that's just kind of where it is. The state has declined so far to push forward on any sort of a mask mandate statewide or other statewide changes. They're relying solely on local health departments, and I don't see that changing in the near future. I'm going to spend the rest of my very brief time talking about pandemic pupil accounting and seat time, just because we have count day coming up and I want to hit on a few key things. The good, the bad, and the ugly of seat time this year is that the good is we don't have any equal plans, no special plans that you have to file and keep track of, and no daily two-way interaction logs or any of the rest of that. The bad is that we're in the third pandemic school year and we're still dealing with how to count seat time for students that aren't traditionally in their seats. And the ugly is that we have no clear path for transitions of modality between fully in-person and remote learning. What we do know for sure is that going into this year, we've gone back to the pupil accounting rules from before the pandemic. In other words, everything that was in place before the pandemic is back in place. Everything that was in place just for the pandemic, all those people accounting rules that you had to learn last year just to get through the year, yeah, forget about them, chuck them out. We're back to where we were pre-pandemic, which is full on 21F, including EDPs for all your kids that want to do asynchronous virtual, parent permission. Got to make sure that whatever courses you're using for asynchronous virtual are listed in the course catalog. You got to have 180 days, 1,098 hours, and you have to show 75% attendance in order to count a day. So all of those rules are back in place. What we have gotten since then are 2 MDE memos. This is the first one and the biggest of them. As we read this, as MASSP reads this, and I am going to the People Accounting Association conference tomorrow. I've been beating on MDE for clarification. Hopefully by the end of tomorrow, at least somebody has given me an answer. But as we read this, 21F may be used as a pivot for remote learning. In other words, if you're going along and you've got your students in person and you need to move to remote learning, this memo to us seems to say that you can pivot to remote instruction, asynchronous virtual instruction as an option. In order to do that, you have to have all your paperwork in line, right? You got to have your EDPs and your parent permission and everything listed in the catalog, the course catalog, et cetera. But it's there as an option. A two-way interaction, per this memo, can be an assignment with discussion. Now, what is discussion? Because it's supposed to be for asynchronous learning, I see discussion as feedback. In other words, student turns in an assignment, teacher sends feedback on the assignment, you've got a two-way interaction. So if you need to go there, that's how I would probably be doing it. And if you have students doing asynchronous, they don't count towards 75% attendance. In other words, if you need to prove that you've got 75% attendance for the day and everybody's doing virtual asynchronous learning under 21F, you don't have to worry about it. The memo also said that if you need to do paper packets, you just kind of have to wing it and call MDE and make it up as you go. And the memo really emphasizes other options like distance learning, homebound hospitalized. The second memo reminds you that you need to have properly credentialed teachers in place, that is grade level and subject area certified, or you face a salary penalty for improperly placed teachers. If you're not sure whether your teacher is properly placed, pull a sub permit. Your options for virtual learning or for distance learning, remote learning this year are virtual learning. We talked about distance learning. That's synchronous remote learning. In other words, everybody's on a Zoom together and the teacher is teaching a lesson via Zoom. You can cancel school, call it a snow day. You can provide homebound hospitalized services if you have 1 or 2 students that are out sick, and you can just let people be absent. Those are really your options this year for remote learning if you need to shift to that. Finally, just a quick reminder that you need to have suicide hotlines printed on all of your student IDs. This law October 15th and applies to all IDs, which means that if you have IDs that were printed before that don't have suicide hotlines on them, print yourself out a bunch of stickers and start stickering IDs. If you've gotten your new IDs and they all have suicide prevention hotlines on them, great. We know LifeTouch did this for everybody that bought their IDs through LifeTouch, but just be aware that that's out there. And with that, I am done. I saw there was a question. Let me get to that. Can I explain EDPs for all virtual kids? So 21F says that you have to have an EDP in place in order for a student to learn in order to count a student under 21F. So the 21F was originally written as a law designed to allow students to force schools to let them go virtual. It empowers the student or parent to elect up to 2 virtual courses. And it was originally written for high school. This was 10 plus years ago. Well, it couldn't have been 10 years ago. I was at MASSP and I've been at, never mind. Let's not talk about how long I've been at MASSP. Anyway, the law was not originally written the way it's being used now. And so this is a leftover requirement that you have an EDP for every kid learning under 21F. It doesn't really work very well for elementary kids. It doesn't really work very well for anybody in 7th grade and younger because you don't have EDPs for all those kids necessarily. That said, what you have to have in order to do 21F and to count the pupil on count day is you have to have started an EDP for the pupil and have it completed by the end of the year. The Michigan Pupil Accounting and Attendance Association has a sample EDP for elementary students out on their website. If you need it, I would strongly recommend going there and checking it out, even for like your 6th graders or maybe your 7th graders who don't quite have an EDP yet. your seventh graders that don't have an EDP yet, maybe get that started early in the year so that you can show it started, and then you'll know you'll have it finished by the end of the year because all seventh graders get an EDP. That's how I'd handle it, but you got to have one. I talked a lot. What else?
Anyone else have any questions? All right, seeing none. Thank you so much, Bob. We always appreciate your updates, keeping everything straight for everyone. That's awesome. And sorry for my late arrival to the party here. My computer decided to update, this Apple thing that's going on. So caught in that trap. But I'm happy to be here with everyone this morning and excited to hear what you have to share. As we get going, of course, we always want to start on a positive note, but man, oh man, I just want you all to know, how much I feel for you at the start of school and how many challenges we certainly recognize you're facing, and all the things that are going on in the background in terms of, whether you may be, arguing with parents or arguing with teachers or, trying to deal with people who aren't happy about this policy or that policy. I happen to be on a statewide webinar yesterday with Superintendent Rice. And, I just said, I just want to make sure that you understand the types of things that people are dealing with. And so spent about 5 minutes just talking to him about some situations that, I was aware of that were happening in schools. I just wanted to make sure he really knows that, although all of you are posting amazing things online and making, things great for kids, there's a lot going on behind the scenes. And it's important that people recognize that because, your job is already difficult. And then dealing with everything else that's going on just makes it that much more interesting, doesn't it? So I just appreciate you and wanted you to know that, as always, MASSP is advocating for you at every chance we get. And just giving people kind of the heads up about, the difficulty that people are facing in the field. And that really doesn't matter where you are. Every district, has its own challenges because we're in a situation right now where it's almost impossible to have complete happy land, no matter what your policy is. So we are going to go ahead and just start with our sharing today, because that's what makes this webinar so great. So I know that we've got a number of people already lined up, but as Ryan noted, and he'll drop the link to the document in the chat. If you want to share also, just go ahead and throw your name in. This doesn't have to be fancy bells and whistles and slides. You can just, share something verbally as well. So let's kick off with Steve Carlson from Sandusky Jr. Senior High School.
Good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all. And thanks MASSP for putting this together. Excuse me. The back to school at Sandusky, it's kind of been like a mix between like what's actually happening, but then also this looming what's to come. For context obviously is important. I know some of you may have been like completely virtual last year or hybrid, and others were more like Sandusky. We were face-to-face all year last year with approximately 80% of our students in the building and 20% of our students choosing a virtual learning, a virtual option. This year, we used ESSER funds to hire an additional teacher to be the mentor teacher for all virtual learning. But rather than our teachers teaching that, we're using a combination of Michigan virtual courses and Edgenuity courses to manage. I think right now we have 9 students in my building of 480 choosing a virtual option. In our county right now, masks are strongly encouraged, but they're not mandatory anywhere. And in 6 of the 7 districts in our county, including Sandusky, quarantines are not even mandatory. So right now, what's going on right now is a lot of school feels really normal, almost pre-pandemic, because locally we don't have very high COVID numbers right now. So a lot of us are kind of going about the day-to-day, kind of almost in that happy land that Wendy was alluding to, but yet we kind of know what's to come. So we have a small number of students and staff that are choosing to wear masks. I know that the vast majority of my staff are vaccinated. I know that the vast majority of my students, we are 7-12, so everyone in my building's 12 or older, we know the vast majority of the students, their parents have not gotten them vaccinated. We have had one confirmed COVID positive case that resulted in about 22 close contacts. When I called those families and let them know about the close contact situation, let them know what their options were, I learned that 4 of them were vaccinated, but 2 of them were teacher kids. I already knew that they had been vaccinated. So 18 were not. And I had a mix between those 18 parents, just to kind of give you some idea of what it's like here in Sandusky. Some of them I've known for years. Steve, what would you do? And my response was, my children are vaccinated. And they said, oh, well, we're not doing that. So what would you do? And I had to tell them, I can't answer that for you. And then I had a couple that, used the occasion to just let me know everything they thought about COVID and masks in schools and how terrible things were last year. In those conversations, I heard rumors that maybe there's other students that have been in the building that have tested positive, but yet their parents don't want to tell the school that. I don't know that is or isn't true. I know that's something we dealt with last year in the spring when we, like everyone else in Michigan, went through high spikes. If you walk through my halls right now, I'd like to say I think you'd find it to be a pretty happy place. I think the students are in a pretty good place for the most part. But I think if you pull the staff, there's just this sense of, okay, what's going to happen next?
Thanks, Steve. We appreciate you kind of giving us the lowdown on what's going on in Sandusky. So do you feel like in terms of just, preparedness, if you had to go virtual, as a school due to your enrollment numbers tomorrow, would you be prepared to do that?
We would. Last year we purchased Brightspace, and we leaned pretty heavily. More than half of our teachers leaned pretty heavily on the Michigan virtual content. But going into year 2, I didn't have a single staff member that really felt strongly about Brightspace going forward, and were more comfortable just using their own stuff. So we've been using Chromebooks for several years here. Most of our teachers pre-pandemic were at least adept, if not completely fluent with the ins and outs of Google Classroom. So if we had to switch tomorrow, our students and staff already know we'll use Google Classroom as our LMS. There's some convenience with that. There's a little less, oomph to it. I think most educators in Michigan or nationwide, know the difference between Google Classroom and a true LMS at this point. But we think Google Classroom would meet our needs best in terms of convenience. And we will go to sort of a virtual block schedule, which is what we were using last year when we were virtual for like kind of that between Thanksgiving and Christmas period. It won't be perfect, and I've had conversations prior to today with Bob about what it means for our paper packet kids in attendance, and so that's a concern we'll have to figure out as we go. But that's what we'll do. We'll teach via Zoom. We'll post assignments through Google Classroom, and we'll do all kinds of outreach along the way.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing, just giving people the opportunity to hear what's going on in other lands. So let's go in alphabetical order and head over to our president, Nina Davis. Good morning, Nina.
Good morning, everyone. So a lot of similarities in the world of L'Anse Creuse to what Steve just talked about in Sandusky. We were face-to-face as well for the full year last year, with about 75% of the students in my building here in person, 25% virtual. We did use the Edmentum platform for our virtual students last year, but this year we have hired full-time virtual staff. So the small percentage of students who chose to go virtual this year do have dedicated teachers in front of them all day, with the exception of 2 exploratory elective classes that they do take Edmentum. Here in my building, I have just over 650 students, and 15 are virtual. So the large majority of the students are here in the building with us this year. We were on a block schedule with the early release for virtual time last school year. And obviously we're back to the full schedule. We don't have the reduced day, and we're back to a 6-hour day. So it is different, a little different. Teachers have had to get used to teaching 6 hours again after having the block schedule last year. But so far things are going well. And we are countywide on a mass recommendation. So our district is also mass recommended. I would say the majority of our students are not wearing masks. Just off the top of my head, I would say I probably see about 15% of students wearing masks. Kind of the same numbers with staff as well. It's just a case by case, room by room type situation. But for the most part, it feels good being in the building. We did not use lockers last year, so that was something different for us this year. We are back to using lockers. And interestingly for us, because the only students in our building who were familiar with lockers would be our 8th graders, and they only used them for half of the school year 2 years ago, we had to hand out a lot of locker keys this year because our students are struggling with learning combinations and getting back into the lockers. I did, prior to the year beginning, sent a message out to parents recommending that they go buy a lock just so that kids could practice, locks, because we did anticipate that was going to be an issue, but that has been one of our large stumbling blocks this school year. We did pick up this week, yesterday, with our first cases coming in. So we're back contact tracing. We are in the county, we adopted the 3 feet contact tracing. So it has been easier in terms of we're not quarantining as many students, but we do have tables throughout our building and not desks. So that has been difficult for us to, in order to fully 3 feet space all of our students. It's impossible. As well as we are pretty maxed in our building this year. The majority of my classes are 35 students in a class. So, we're packed over here, and it is, it becomes difficult when it comes to contact tracing. One of the concerns that I wanted to put out there and kind of question my colleagues on is we're struggling in our lunchrooms because we are back to 3 lunch periods. We've utilized all of the free space that we have to space out, but it is, we could not do, with our block scheduling, we were able to do every other seat in the lunchroom, and we're not there this year. So we are taking out quite a few students with our contact tracing in the lunchroom. So it's one of the areas where we struggle. And it's an issue throughout our district. I'm sure throughout the state, other people are battling the same thing. But just I'd be curious to hear some unique ideas if people have come up with some unique things to do in the lunchrooms. In terms of if we were to go virtual, we are using Schoology for our LMS. We also went to 1-to-1 this year with Chromebooks. So every student has a Chromebook. Our teachers do use Schoology on a daily basis. So everything has to be on Schoology, even when we're here face to face. So if we were to transition virtual, I think that we would be in a pretty good position because our students are accustomed to using the LMS daily and know the routines of their teachers. So that is a summary of how things are going over here.
Nina, I saw as you were sharing about the locker combination, there was a lot of head shaking. So that must have been a really fun couple of first days getting back in the middle school, knowing that you couldn't even count on your 8th graders to remember how to use a locker com. So there was definitely a lot of information there. And if anyone has something to share in terms of how they're handling lunches, if you want to unmute and share that now, that would be fantastic.
Wendy, I'm happy to share. Just like Nina, we went back to 3 lunches. Last year we had 134 desks in the cafeteria, and it was like heaven. And this year now we're back to our cafeteria tables with no options to do any social distancing. So my assistant principal and our cafeteria crew are simply doing their best to do seating charts every single day. So if we had to go back and do some tracing, we would be able to do that easily. I'm looking for donations or any place to write a grant because I need 200 picnic tables outside. I'm looking for some picnic tables to get some sun. But Nina brings up a very good point. We can do the social distancing all day long, but then we put them in the cafeteria and then the restrictions are, I mean, our hands are tied with it.
Yeah, our cafeteria is very small. So even from last year, we ate in the gym. Well, nice weather, we were able to eat outside. We got some more tables. And so the kids love eating outside. And then otherwise, though, we're in the gym. So we have the seats marked off. So they can eat in the cafeteria if they want to. And again, the seats are marked off with where you can sit. You can sit on a blue dot, but don't sit if it's not a blue dot there. And then same thing goes in the gym. So that's where we go. And then we just show movies in there to keep them entertained. A Disney Plus subscription. Not sure if we're supposed to do that, but
That's a good share, Tim. And man, Amy, I can't imagine trying to keep that seating chart of the cafeteria all the time. Has got to be challenging. So doesn't sound like there's a lot of good answers here, unless you do happen to have good outdoor space, which obviously isn't going to, help you necessarily all year long, but at least it's something this time of year. All right. I see other people are also sharing in the chat. Did someone else want to jump in?
I was going to say we have a 6-8 building and we're having the same issue in the cafeteria. In addition to, we don't have staff. We're missing some teacher supervisors as well as our and aid staff. I had somebody apply yesterday and she said, well, I can only do 9 days every 2 weeks. And I'm going to take her because I'll take 9 days. But Amy, we're doing the same thing. We have once a month, kids are expected to fill in their name on a seating chart. And that has made contact tracing so much easier. So then we can go to the cameras and just find that quickly. But yes, we have tables and we don't have enough space to sit every other one. That also help with the cleanliness of the cafeteria. So I was hoping we could go back to that. We just don't have enough seats. Well, because we only have about 10 students in one grade level virtual now instead of multiple sections.
All right. Well, those are some common problems. So I don't know about you, but sometimes when I'm struggling with something, just knowing that others are in the same boat, for some reason, it makes me feel a little bit better. Like maybe I'm not the only one that hasn't figured this out or, is dealing with something. So let's jump to our next person. Jeff Dykhouse, you are up, sir.
Well, good morning, everyone. And if I start cutting out, we've had some spotty internet here in the district today. So just if I freeze or if I start getting garbly, let me know. Thanks for giving me this opportunity to share. I like doing slides because then I don't feel like my whole face is filling up your screen. So I threw together just a couple of points that I wanted to share on these slides that East Grand Rapids has been going through. So some stumbling blocks that we've faced to start the year. First off, we had to make some decisions on what protocols we kept from last year and going into this year. And as a staff, we made some decisions. Last year, we didn't let kids use lockers because we wanted them moving quickly to their classes and not congesting the hallways. And as we are now back to 99.9% in person, I've got 2 kids that are fully virtual out of 650. With those numbers, we knew that we couldn't have backpacks in the classroom. They were getting clogged up, they were full, our teachers were tripping on things. So we needed to open that space back up. So we have kids using their lockers again. We do have our stairwells designated as one-way traffic. We never had that before COVID, and that has helped to keep that traffic flowing in the hallways, and that has helped out. So we're kind of going through those pieces, right? What are the things that we're keeping? What are the things that we're going away? And hopefully some of those decisions will even be post-COVID, right? Those kind of things like, hey, we don't always have to go back to doing school the way we did it before. We can learn some new things and keep them even after COVID. So East Grand Rapids here in Kent County on the west side of the state, quarantine is not required by our health department unless there's like 2 factors. If it's a household contact, they have to quarantine, or if there's an outbreak in the school, they have to quarantine, but otherwise students do not have to. So we've had 1 case of COVID here in the 3 weeks we've been back at school. We identified our close contacts. One of the things that we changed this year, so last year when we had close contacts, my admin team and I and my AP and I were calling every family, right? And going through that spiel, you've got your talking points and going through the spiel of what does it mean to be a close contact? What is quarantine? Well, since we are no longer required to quarantine, as you can imagine, those phone calls just eat up hours of the day. And so one change that we made as a district this year was we now send letters to families to identify that they were a close contact. So we email them. a letter that says you are a close contact. Here's the guidelines, right? If you develop symptoms, you have to quarantine, that whole spiel. And honestly, we've bought back hours and hours of time just by changing that communication. And, we were very upfront with our families to say that we're changing this plan. We're going to the letters. Obviously, if you have questions, call the school. But that was one really positive step that we took just to buy hours of the day back. One of the stumbling blocks that we had early on, so when we were about a week before the school year started, our district decided on doing a K-6 mask mandate for all students K-6. And we put in the letter that there would be some exemptions. We were going to provide like mental health exemptions and some medical exemptions. About a week later, the health department put in a K-6 mask mandate, and they did not allow the same exemptions that we were going to. So that was a stumbling block that we faced, where we had talked to some families and said, you can get an exemption for mental health. And then the health department swoops in, they put the order in place, and now mental health is no longer an allowable exemption for our health department. So a stumbling block that we faced, but overall, right, having those conversations with those families, working through it, still giving kids mask breaks, right? We worked through that, and kids can step out in the hallway or step to the back of the room and get a mask break, and just being right upfront with those families, developing some individual plans if we need to for their family or for their kids. So being in a 6-8 building, it's interesting, right? My 6th graders are mandated to wear masks, and my 7th and 8th graders don't have to. And we are seeing across our 7th and 8th grade, probably about 10% of our kids are choosing to wear masks in 7th and 8th grade. But 6th grade, it's everyone. But some of the things that we're doing with our 6th graders, right? It's all about that positive encouragement. And I think what most of us probably see, those of us that have the mask mandates, right? If the staff is positive about masks, if the parents at home are positive about masks, typically the kids don't really care. Right? The ones that kick back and push back, it's usually what they're hearing, right? From exterior sources that are encouraging to fight back against the mask and fight back against the man and, right, fight those masks. But we just do a ton of positive encouragement. I threw some pictures in here. Our staff love going outdoors, especially for those 6th graders to get some mask breaks. But quite often teachers will be outside. We've got great spaces outdoors where kids are having class outside using this great fall weather that we have. We did a new thing last week, which again, post-COVID, I would probably go back and do it again. We did our class meetings outdoors. So that's the picture in like the bottom left corner. We had the class meeting outdoors. We incorporated some games and our kids loved it. And I have never had a class meeting where the kids listened so intently, because we told them we have 30 minutes for a class meeting. We have, this material to get through, and whatever time we have left, we're going to play games. I've got gift cards and candy bars. And if you're quiet for the class meeting, we'll play more games at the end. And so kids I've never seen them so focused and listening during a class meeting. And I loved it. And then we played games at the end. We did bucket bonanza and a giant ring toss, and kids were cheering. It was awesome. Again, class meetings are sometimes a downer because you're going through your expectations. You're going through all the stuff they got to hear, but then you mix it in with some games and fun, and we just had a blast doing it. So doing it outdoors, mixing in some games was really, really awesome. And then for our district, obviously we've been encouraging the vaccination, and I threw a little chart up there from Kent County Health Department, which on their toolkit, they measure, right, the vaccination rates. And so our district, I equate to probably the biggest reason that we've had so few cases in our district is amongst our 12 to 17-year-olds, we've got 99% of our kids vaccinated. And even our adult population here in East Grand Rapids, 98% vaccinated. So we held the vaccine clinic at the middle school last year, which again, just getting the word out and encouraging kids and families to go out and talk to their doctors, but also to seek out that vaccine. So again, I think that we equate that to a lot of our success with not seeing the spread as much in our local community. And then the last one, I know Wendy had asked earlier about, if you have to flip, that switch and go to virtual. So we have Canvas as our LMS. We invested in it last year. It is back this year. And again, we've just done as much as we can up front to prep our staff, our students, and our families to be ready. So we've created how-to videos for parents on how to create an account, how to access their child's account, how-to videos for students, How do you use this feature? How do you find the calendar function? How do you email your teacher through Canvas? At our open house and our registration events, we had sign-up tables, we had laptops set out so that parents could set up their parent account right at open house, right at that back school night. Again, just that access, that really hammering that home, that this is our system. Parent letters, if kids have to quarantine, those directions laid out very clearly. Here's where your child will access school. Here's where you can, right, get contact with your teacher. So really just trying to hammer that home, this system. And I'll be honest, when we rolled it out last school year, there was some pushback from staff because everyone was Google Classroom and they loved it. And why are we rolling this out? And now a year into it, I don't think there's a single person that would go back now that they see the functionality of this program and the ease of use to have access for materials for kids. So again, just hammering it home and continue to remind people and putting out their directions and how-tos have all been successful for us. So I think that's the end of my slideshow.
Jeff, awesome. I mean, two things that you said that I thought were particularly amazing. Of course, everyone's blown away by the vaccination rate. Everybody's like wowing in the chat. So how did you get that data? Is the health department tracking that by district?
Yep. So Kent County Health Department has a dashboard, and that is one of the slides on the dashboard is that they are tracking local district and local community vaccination rates. And then there's also like a transmission rate section on there that shows number of transmissions per 100,000 people. So,
that is fantastic. And I was super impressed with your class meeting idea. I'd seen you posted some of those slides on social media, and I think that was genius. So great job with that. Really well done. See if anyone else.
I did have one question, but I think Bob has gone off of the meeting now. Have you heard, Wendy, about Biden's vaccination mandate for employers? Is that going to be in effect for schools? Have we heard anything on that?
I just asked Superintendent Rice about that on the meeting that I was on with him yesterday. And he said, of course, there's going to be a number of legal challenges that's going to go through probably in both the public and private sector to see, if that mandate's going to stand. So he personally doesn't see that like taking effect for, at least mid-school year in terms of being able to get it through the system like that. But it does appear if legal challenges, aren't able to be successful, that any district that has over 100 employees would be part of that. So stay tuned. That's kind of the initial hot take on that. All right, so we're going to keep moving alphabetically. So we're going to go with Amy Hendry, who is the principal at Carter Middle School.
Give me 1 second here. I'm just jumping back. I got a student issue going on, but can you see my screen, Wendy?
Yes.
Oh, there it goes.
I mean, I see you. I'm sorry, I don't see your screen.
Hold on 1 second. All right, well, while I get this up and running, I think I can handle multitasking here. So obviously I concur a lot of what our colleagues have said today. It has been a challenging start. The first picture in my PowerPoint, which I'm going to probably vacate right now, is just my students jumping for joy in front of the school. We had anticipated that our students were going to need some additional SEL support just for the transition, but they have pleasantly surprised us. They're brave and they're excited to be back to school and they're resilient. So they duped us and they're ready to rock and roll. So we shifted gears quickly. Obviously, we are rolling 100% with our academics right now. We did give our staff the opportunity to take the first 6 days of school to work on making connections with students. And we did that across, and I'm pretty excited about that. They did an outstanding job. Just going through some of the lists, I'm totally stealing Jeff's idea. Yes, for the outdoor meetings, I probably will now do my assemblies outdoors. That's a great idea. Looking at transitioning from face-to-face back to virtual, we only have 24 students at Carter Middle School that are virtual. We service about 14,000 across our district, and we have about 500 kids that joined up for virtual, our virtual academy. So as Nina and Lance Creuse, we also have dedicated staff members for those teachers, but we are ready to on the dime. Excuse me. Sorry if I missed you guys, if I lost you there. we're ready to shift on the dime to go back to virtual by using Schoology and WebEx. We are not making an announcement here in Warren Consolidated Schools that we are one-on-one with our laptops, but we do have enough laptops to service all of our students. So we're encouraging our teachers to continue using those laptops as we move through the school year. All they have to do is just request one on our website, and we will have it delivered to the school. So I'm excited to have the computers back. We have struggled with our quarantine mandates here in Warren Consolidated Schools. Macomb County has not made it easy for us to quarantine our students and then contact trace with the documentation. You know, the Excel sheet is actually ridiculous. So we've tried to mainstream it a little bit across the district by uploading just an interview with the parents when they call, with documentation of symptoms and the test results and things of that sort. Thank you, Ryan. You're outstanding for getting that PowerPoint up for me. This is the initial interview process that our secretaries have been trained, and obviously our assistant principal and myself. Once we go through this simple interview process, we are required to send an email to our pandemic manager notifying them that we do have a positive case. And then this slide that Ryan's on right now is our 48-hour tracing. And this is for all of Macomb County. So I hope everybody that's in Macomb County is doing this. This is the contact tracing form that's required for all positive cases. And if Ryan goes to the next slide, this is where you have to put all of the students that have been in close contact, as well as all of their family members that are in your schools. So I talked to Wendy very briefly on text the other day. I had 3 cases after Labor Day. This took about 6 hours for me to do this. And I happened to be the guinea pig for the district because I was the first school that had the cases. It was like we were jumping for joy on the first day of school, and then we came back from Labor Day and I got slammed with 3 cases. And you know, I think this process is a thorough process. It's just completely time consuming. So just like everybody else, you know, we're contact tracers during the day and we're principals from 4 until we fall asleep. So it has extended our responsibility significantly. I did find it very frustrating that when I did quarantine 26 students from our 3 positive cases, that we had 4 students come back the next day and just defy my order to stay home. So I had to go back through the contact tracing, and I had to call the parents, and I had to put the students in quarantine in the school. And that was very frustrating for us because some of our parents are making it very difficult for us to manage and keep our students safe. So, you know, again, I took a lot of notes while everybody was talking. I think I hit the majority of the points. I love the idea of the quarantine letters. You know, we had to make 26 personal phone calls the other day to all of the families. When we make a personal phone call, we have to interview the family and ask if they're able to quarantine their child. We are required to ask if the student is vaccinated. We are required to ask if the student has had COVID in 90 days. And it's just one interview and documentation after another. So I'm hoping that we can streamline that process a little bit because it is exhausting. And I'd really like to spend more time with our students, obviously out in the hallways and in the cafeteria with my assistant principal. But we are uploading vaccination cards in Warren Consolidated Schools. I didn't hear anybody mention that, so I wanted to throw that out there. We are asking families to upload vaccination cards to our in-house data warehouse, which is Document Depot. That will help the process for me. If a student is vaccinated, I don't even have to talk to them in the contact tracing piece. So I am curious on how many others are doing that. That to me is, once we get that rolling, we have open house tonight, and that's going to be my first part of my presentation because it will certainly make my life much easier to handle. So with that said, I appreciate everybody's sharing an opportunity. This last slide, this was an outstanding activity that you know, you can take back to your classrooms or back to your teachers to take back to your classrooms. I stole this from Robin Stanton at Beer Middle School in Warren Consolidated Schools. I simply copied all of the Scrabble letters, and I handed out 2 sets of the alphabet to my staff on the first day of school. I told them that whoever sent me a photograph or multiple photographs with the highest totals, and I would buy them lunch, and the staff went crazy. Now, we opened our school year and our professional development this year with social emotional learning, and I gave my staff a day and a half to spend some time coordinating activities and social emotional learning strategies and tools that they can bring the students closer into their classroom. And I've already had 4 staff ask for the Scrabble letters so they can take them back to their classroom. So we did obviously any letters or words that were related to social emotional learning, but if you do a Scrabble set and give it to your teachers, they can go back and they can use it for any activity. They can use it for an icebreaker. They can use it for science vocabulary words. They can use it for the presidents of the United States, for those bobbleheads that you have, Jeff. They can use it for anything. It is an outstanding activity. And I just wanted to share that with all the members today. I appreciate the time. Thanks for having me today, Wendy.
Great stuff, Amy. I'm so sorry to hear about that time suck that contact tracing does. And don't you just, I mean, I just think it's so fascinating that you have, Jeff on one side of the state where they're like, guess we're not, this isn't a thing anymore. And then we have on your side of the state, Amy, where it's like, the most thorough process in the world. And I'm not advocating for one or the other. I just find it so interesting because for people that maybe don't have a lot of contact with educators outside their district, you think everyone's doing what you're doing, right? And then when you hear how other people are handling things, it's just fascinating. So not making a judgment one way or the other, and this is the stuff that I point out to people because I do hear from all of you statewide what's going on. And so I try to just point out how things work from one side of the state to the next and why we have inconsistencies and problems in different areas. So very interesting. All right, last but certainly not least, I know Tim Sanchez always has awesome things to share. So thanks for being with us again this morning, Tim.
Outstanding. Hey, thanks for everyone for sharing. I'm writing down all these notes here and my hand's cramping up like it did in college. Impressive number there, Jeff, 99%. I'm pretty sure I'd win a bet that 99% of my kids aren't aware of what a vaccine is. So that is impressive. Holy smokes. And then, Amy, I might have to call you on that staff Scrabble thing. That looks awesome. We are very, very similar to Steve in terms of numbers of our kids here and kind of what we're all doing as far as MASSP being encouraged. Many of our students are back. We're also the same with Nina in terms of we have about 10 to 20% of our kids are wearing masks, even though they are not mandatory, they are encouraged. But our numbers here, we're very fortunate right now as of 9/14, our numbers are low in our district. But we know that can come. So our philosophy here is to always be ready, be ready for whatever could come. So I believe that we are ready. And so this is kind of what we did. I'll try to fly through some of these. This was for our teachers at the beginning of the year. When it was announced prior to school starting that we were going masks optional, I didn't want it to be of, hey, everything's back to normal, because it's not. And we did a lot of things last year. And we think we did a lot of things well last year, which kept us in person. We only had to do 3 days virtual last year, but there were a lot of things that we did. And so I kind of gave them a little continuum of, last year's at one end, no safety procedures on the other end. We are definitely not jumping all the way to the other end of the continuum. We're only doing mask optional, and that's a huge one. That's a big one, right? So we need to make sure we keep everything else in place. So some of the things that we're doing, we're still keeping up with social distance tape on the floors. I think Jeff also talked about how the stairwells, because we're a three-floor school, we're still not sharing everything, even though we know that it's an airborne illness and that the risk of catching it from touching something is low. We're still not doing that. So we're not sharing stuff. Alpha seeding charts really helped us out a lot. If you guys don't do alpha seeding charts, and I'll kind of show how that helped us in a little bit, but that's a big one for us. And then I know our teachers want to group, but we're just not doing it. We're not grouping. We will group using headphones and Google Meets. That worked well last year. It's not the same, but again, as you guys all know, we want to create the least amount of close contacts possible. And teachers also don't want that. Teachers don't want kids out either. So while this is a strain, this is how we do alpha seating. So every teacher, this is the front of the classroom. Every teacher starts on the left and they just snake around. And what happens when you do that, kids end up sitting next to the same kids in their classes, and then you have less close contacts to send out. Sometimes you've got behavior issues, right? Like, hey, Jimmy and Johnny, they can't sit next to each other. So we come up with plans that way. And you also have IEPs or 504s where a kid either needs to sit in the back or sit in the front. So if we do that, let's say a kid needs to sit in the front, then their last name just starts with an A. So if I'm Sanchez, I would be A Sanchez. So I would sit up in the front left. I would be first, like my last name started with an A. And if there's two of us, then we'd be alphabetical order. So again, we still sit next to the same kids as we move throughout the classroom. And then I had to make sure, because last year our seating charts, so our teachers create PDFs, we use Skyward, but create PDFs of the seating charts, and then they put them in Google folders. And last year I didn't really give them a system for that. And so I always had to call a teacher every single contact trace. I'm like, hey, I don't see your 4th hour, or hey, I don't have it here. So I gave everybody, we walked through this during the opening meeting. So every single teacher has got Baker, Brandt seating charts, and then within them, they put their PDFs in there. So it's automatically shared with me. I can just go right in, pull up their seating chart, and we're good to go. When we do contact tracing, kind of create a little mock one, but I just have my own spreadsheet. I have the teacher's name over here, and then I go through each seating chart and I put the kids on here. And so then I'll highlight the double. So this is kind of what one would look like. And then you see I total them up. So we had 27 kids, but we had 4 doubles. So we really are only contact tracing 23. We averaged 8, saving 8 kids by alpha seating of not having to send them home. So 8, we averaged less is probably how I should word that. 8 less kids going home because of alpha seating, because it's a pain for our teachers. They don't like it, but they see the value in those numbers. So we do it. We run this list. I then sort them in this order, and I send this list to our secretary. She creates a Skyward report right away with names, numbers, all that. And then we start calling. But Jeff, I think we're gonna be on the same boat with you, is we're gonna have a script, because it's so complicated and the message can get lost depending on who calls and what questions the person asks, that we want to get a consistent one, and then call me. So if you have a question, just call me, and that way it's the same consistent message going out. If we call them and give them the recommendations for DHS, and if a student chooses to stay home and they don't have internet, then we give Wi-Fi, because we are a Google school and we use Google Classroom. So talking about, are we ready? I know I'm going fast. Sorry, but I see the time. We're a Google school. So again, we like just to keep everything consistent for our kids. And so every teacher's classroom in Google Classroom, everything is posted. Everything needs to be posted. And it all looks the same. So week 1, and then you just paste the new week up on top. Week 2, week 3, and they're labeled that way so that students know where to go to get their work. A big thing that our parents didn't know, and so we try to teach them all now, is the to-do list. Mine says to review. So having a parent go there, that's a key one. If you guys use Google Classroom, parents like, I don't know if they got their work turned in or not. They told me they did. They click on this, it gives them it for all of their classes, so they can know if they have stuff turned in or not turned in. I think mine says to review, because I'm technically a teacher on here. I think the kid says to do. Yeah, and then the last thing we did is we don't have a stadium. And so I love the idea that Jeff had of going outside and making it fun, having games. We'd love to have fun here, but we don't have a place for our kids to sit outside. And so we do a shocker. We do videos here. And so every hour we go over just a couple minutes of the main rules, either from the handbook or from, hey, these are key things we need to know for the pandemic, right? Or to keep us safe. And so each hour a teacher will click on the video. It's me doing something goofy, and it's a 3-minute video. So every kid gets it. Every kid gets the same message as you go through, and it's every hour we go over something. And then we also use this as we onboard kids. So as kids come in after the first day of school, part of the process, they take the NWEA test. They get connected with Google Classroom. We actually have a master spreadsheet of all the Google Classroom codes. so our counselor can get those kids hooked into a Google Classroom before they even step foot into the physical classroom. And then they show them these. So that way our kids at least know the main rules as they're coming into class. They all have those down. So yeah, I think that's what, we're not using lockers. We actually liked that last year. We'll see how long that goes, but they just go right from class to class and we're not using lockers. I think that was all of what we had. I love the idea of the uploading the vaccine cards. We're going to look at that. And yeah, I think that's what we have here.
Awesome. Tim, you always have great ideas too. I don't know how you do it, dude, but you're on it all the time.
Stealing from
Amy,
everybody. That's what you got to do.
I'm going to be curious next time we come back together, if you can let us know, if there's resistance to uploading those vaccine cards, because, I know that there's always data privacy concerns and things of that nature. And then, of course, people that don't like the concept of a vaccine passport or whatever they're being called, right? So I'll just be curious to just hear an update from you on if people are truly giving you those cards and what that's looking like. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
Tim, the Google Classroom stuff continues to just be impressive to me. I just think that really has to be the way of the future as we move forward, that kids come in and log on and get information every single day, so that if we do have disruption in learning again in the future, they already know the drill. It's not like another learning process for them. So I think that's genius. And, we all know as adults, I don't know about you, but if I'm off of a particular app for a while and then I go back to use it again, I'm like, I know this was there. I don't exactly remember how to do it. So it's like keeping both your adults and your students in the practice of using that learning management system, whatever it might be, receiving and giving. I think information is just super important. Think about the locker combination example, right? I mean, geez, we couldn't even remember how to do that. There's no way. If they haven't logged into a system in a week or 2 weeks or a month, they're certainly not going to be adept at doing it again. So I appreciate you sharing that. I just think it really is the best way to go for kids. So I think we had another great session again today. Our goal is that we want to keep growing these opportunities and keep, trying to get more people to join in and share their thinking. As you, I'm sure, learned today, you probably got a lot of great ideas, and we want to keep doing that in the future. So our next meeting is going to be on October 12th, I see. And Ryan, do you happen to remember what that topic is? I'm looking. Oh, I see. Okay, we've got September 14th is coming up, and that one that one was today. October 12th is teacher evaluation, student growth goals, and teacher growth. So I see that we've already got Jason Messenger signed up for that one, and Nina from Let's Cruise. So if anyone else has successful practices that they're using in terms of giving teachers really good feedback, being able to help teachers set, meaningful goals, not teacher evaluation in the gotcha sense or, a negative, but if you've been able to really turn it into a growth mindset and a positive for your staff, if there's anything you're doing that you could share, I'm sure everybody would benefit from that. So that will be our next one. Anything for the good of the cause that I missed, Ryan, or anyone else before we sign off for today?
This is recorded, and we'll send this out in the document that we were taking notes on. So that all gets sent out to everybody. So you have that. And I did just put the link into, so if you do want to sign up with Nina and Jason for next session to present, you can do that as well.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And if there's anything that you're struggling with that you think MASSP should be aware of to be able to advocate on your behalf, don't ever hesitate to give me a call or shoot me an email. Just being armed with stories does actually help. So if you think that there's something that's a unique situation that you want me to be aware of, don't hesitate. Thanks, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your week. Stay safe, stay healthy.